as the door opened wider. Should I break and run? Maybe I could brazen the bust out. I stepped from behind the desk. The sound of the man's voice halted the woman in the doorway. When she turned to answer, I made my move. Moving quickly, but silently, I recrossed the short distance and reached the door, praying all the while that the woman framed in the doorway concealed me from the man's view. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, leaving the door ajar. Without looking back, I rushed towards the stairway. Before I reached the stairs, the elevator stopped and a woman got out. I gave her my dazzling smile and stepped into the elevator. I pushed the button for the first floor, then tried to arrange the awkward pocketbook under my arm so it wouldn't be conspicuous. At the second floor, the elevator stopped, causing my heart to flutter. An elderly woman peeped into the empty elevator. "Up?" she asked stupidly. "Down," I replied, as I pushed the button for the door to close. When I got downstairs and out on the street, I looked back over my shoulder at the building. This was one hell of a way to be spending my 17th birthday, I thought bitterly. I reached my car and rode away from the downtown district. After I found a small, deserted side street, I parked and started searching the pocketbook. The purse had $10 in cash in it. I cursed for about 10 minutes, then investigated the rest of the contents. The bank book I inspected with care. The $1,450 she had deposited in the bank really interested me. I examined all of her identification. Only her driver's license had a revealing W on it. I tossed the license out the window and started the car up. There was no way in the world for Boots to pass for white, but the rest of the ID could be used by her. The woman was 28 years old. Boots could pass for 28, with her belly sticking out in front of her a mile. Providing we found a white bank teller. They always said we looked alike to them. Taking my time on the slippery streets, I reached the hotel with time to spare. The bank didn't open till 9. Whereas I was completely unfazed about stealing the purse, I did have a few qualms over Boots withdrawing the money. Despite my concern, I was going to make her try and withdraw all that cash. After all, I reasoned, if she fucked up and got caught, being pregnant would be in her favor when she went before the judge. Boots was lying on the bed, moaning when I entered the room. I put my hand on her head. It was hot. "I'm bleeding, Whoreson," she whispered. I stared down at her for a moment. "Listen, baby, ain't there something you can do? Like, pack yourself or something? Just slow the bleeding down? I got something I want you to do now." "I might not be able to stop the bleeding, Whoreson. I done already soaked through 2 pads and a sheet. I think I'm hemorrhaging." My mind was running super fast. I needed her now. "I tell you what, baby, take and pack yourself with cotton. Then get dressed, and I'll take you to a doctor." There was no compassion in my heart, nor was I conscious of any concern about her having a miscarriage. In fact, I hoped that she would lose the baby. If my mother could see me now, she couldn't help but be proud. At 17, I was developing into a cold, vicious pimp. This is the way I reasoned with myself, but in my heart, I knew that if Jessie could see what I was doing, she would have thrown up in my face. I needed that money, though, and time was something I didn't have. If I didn't get it this morning, it would be too late later on in the day. Boots was too slow getting dressed for me, so I helped her. After getting a maternity dress on her, I grabbed a spring coat and tossed it across her shoulders. She was in too much pain to notice that I'd left her heavy winter coat on the rack by mistake. The mistake had been made on purpose. I wanted the bank teller to be sure and see she was pregnant. Finally, we got ready to go. I had to just about carry her down the stairs. I began to have doubts about her holding up long enough for us to make it to a bank. At no time did I even think about taking her to a hospital or doctor. I wanted the money before the bank could be notified. There was another stop I had to make before going to the bank. I parked in a no-standing zone and rushed into a drugstore. I bought a pair of round-rimmed glasses and some pain pills. The eyeglasses she put on, the pills she couldn't swallow without water, and I didn't have the time to stop and get any. Driving towards the outskirts of town, I searched frantically for a branch office bank. I finally found one, near the city limits. By this time, Boots seemed nearly delirious. Her legs were stretched out towards me, while her head was against the door. When I shook her, she didn't wake up completely. I got out of the car and picked up a handful of slush. Opening the car door on her side, I held her head and washed her face with dirty snow. She sputtered and spit, but the ice shocked her awake. "Listen, baby," I whispered. "You gonna have to be kinda sharp now. I done told you a dozen times how to do this and how simple it is." I had to help her out of the car. "All you got to do is fill out a withdrawal slip, give it to the teller, and get big bills." "You going with me, Daddy?" she asked, clutching my shoulder for support. "You know I am, baby. You don't think I'd send you by yourself, do you?" I said. I hadn't planned on going in with her, but a blind man could see she would never make it herself. I steered her through the bank entrance. While she filled out the slip, I arranged her coat so that her protruding stomach couldn't help but be seen. It's a belief of mine, I don't know if it's true or not, that people will never suspect pregnant women of a hoax. The mother image is so strong that most people wouldn't imagine a woman in this condition swindling anyone, let alone them. The only doubt I had after entering the bank was when the teller picked up the phone. The only reason I didn't run was that my hands were full trying to keep Boots on her feet. She put most of her weight on me, and I was really holding her up. When I turned back towards the bank teller, she was already talking on the phone. If I ran, I would have to drag Boots, because she was holding on to me for dear life. The teller hung up and smiled. She started counting out the money. To be fair to the lady whose money I was taking, I left $50 in the bank. Back in the car, I just about got Boots settled before she passed out. I pulled out into traffic and drove back towards town as fast as I dared. I still hadn't learned to drive too well, and not having a license, the last thing I wanted was to be stopped. I spotted a doctor's office on the other side of the street. Making a U-turn, I pulled up in front of the building. Some kind of way, I got her half awake so she could stand on her feet if I held her, and I managed to get her into the doctor's office. The receptionist took one look at me holding Boots up and rushed into another room. The white patient sitting around the room stared at us curiously. It wasn't long before she was back, followed by a bald-headed fat man. He was blowing as though he had just run a mile. He tossed his hands in the air. "No, no, no. You must take her to her own gynecologist. Better yet, take her to an obstetrician. But this is the wrong place, young man." I was dumbfounded. I hadn't understood much of what he said, but I did comprehend wrong place. "You a doctor, ain't you?" I asked belligerently. The doctor stared at me as though I were losing my mind. "I'm a dermatologist," he yelled. "Didn't you read the sign outside?" Boots slipped out of my arms and fell on the floor at my feet. The doctor looked as if he were going to have the baby. The nurse rushed to a telephone, while the doctor and I raved. I pulled my large roll of money out. Behind all I heard and knew of white people, I knew this would get results. "Look, Doc," I started to say, "I'll pay—" The doctor raised his hands toward heaven, spoke for a few moments in another language, then said, "I don't want your money. I'm a dermatologist. Don't you understand? There's nothing—" I interrupted him harshly. "Why, you color-struck bastard, you'd allow this young girl to suffer." At the sound of my words, the doctor turned bright red. The nurse spoke up. "Don't worry, I've called an ambulance. It will be here shortly." The doctor and I exchanged a few more choice words before the ambulance crew arrived. When they did arrive, we were standing over Boots, glaring at each other, while the nurse knelt beside her, giving her a shot. As I followed the stretcher from the office, I turned in the doorway. "You're about as useful as a doctor," I said loudly, "as a penis is on a sissy." As I started my car up to follow the ambulance, I glanced at the sign. Dermatologist. I couldn't pronounce the damn word, let alone spell it, and I sure didn't have the slightest idea what it meant. Later at the hospital, an intern, thinking that I was the grief-stricken husband, stopped and explained, "Your wife has had a miscarriage. The membrane was punctured, causing the fetus to die, and when that happened, the uterus started to expel it." "You mean she gonna lose the baby?" I asked, ingenuously. The young intern stared at me for a moment to see if I was serious. Then, realizing that I was just young and dumb, he said, "She has lost the baby. Now we're trying to stop the hemorrhaging so that we don't lose the mother, too." That rang a bell. The last thing I wanted to do was lose a good hoe. After waiting all this time for her to get streamlined, I didn't want to lose her now that she was ready for the track. When he saw the shock in my face, the intern walked away. I felt the bankroll in my pocket. It was $400 short because of the hospital bill. I shouldn't have paid the damn bill so fast. If she died and I hadn't paid the bill, all I'd had to do was deny being her husband, and to hell with the bill. The thought of her dying rang in my mind, followed by the frightening knowledge of what a funeral would cost. I sat down suddenly and began to pray. "Please, Lord, don't let that young girl die." For the next 2 hours I sat there with my head in my hands. Whenever a nurse came by, she would try and console me. They must have imagined me as a grieving husband, for they were all very kind. They didn't realize that I was just as concerned about my $400 as I was about Boots. I don't want this misunderstood, so I'll try and explain it better. If Boots lived, the hell with the 400. But if she died, it was then a two-way blow. A good whore is always worth more than $400 to a good pimp. One of the nurses stopped and persuaded me to go home and get some rest. It didn't take much urging. I've been trying to figure out a good excuse for departing. That way, if something happened, I'd make damn sure they couldn't find me to stick with the burial expense. The next few days were days of worry. I called the hospital constantly. Most of the nurses knew my voice by now, and they kept me up on the latest. She was out of the worst of it, so I could start relaxing. This was really beautiful news. I knew that in the near future, I would be pimping again, and doing it sure enough big.